Awesome. Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang, Gurdjieff gang.
We still need to make that jingle. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Trust me, it's backed up. I'm backed up. I got things to deliver. I got things to do. Oh my gosh! I'm thinking now we're gonna do the holiday album at the end of the celestial year, the astrological year. We keep coming up with things, so it's It's gonna be like leading into the end of March, because March is the last month. Well, until March 20th, right? March 20th is the new year, isn't it? Yeah. So we got a little
Pisces into Aries. Yeah. I'm so keen for that, to be honest, because I've been thinking about this, and it makes so much sense for me, like why it feels like there's been no completion of the things that happened last year. It's because we're still in this time period.
There we go.
This,
maybe that's
cycle.
what it is. We're so in sync, you know, that the things we manifested in saying that we're gonna finish by the end of the year literally is by March 20th. So yes, beautiful. I'm glad we're aligned in that regard. That makes me feel better. I'm not just coming up as to why the holiday album has not been released. Yeah. So welcome everybody. We've got some new folks in here. This is Gurdjieff Gang, Year of 7. This is the 3rd installment. A little background on the book. Well, let's talk about the man. How about that before we get into the minutiae here? So who is Gurdjieff? He's also commonly say Gurdjieff. His full name is George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, also commonly referred to as Georges Ivanovich Gurdjieff and G.I. Gurdjieff, was an influential early 20th century mystic, philosopher, spiritual teacher, and composer, born in what was then an Armenian region of Russia. Of Armenian and Greek descent, Gurdjieff taught that most humans do not possess a unified mind-body consciousness, and thus live their lives in a state of hypnotic waking sleep, but that it is possible to transcend to a higher state of consciousness and achieve full human potential. Gurdjieff described a method attempting to do so, calling the discipline the work, connoting work on oneself, or the method. According to his principles and instructions, Gurdjieff's method for awakening one's consciousness unites the methods of the fakir, monk, or yogi, and thus he referred to it as the fourth way. So we are in the second series of G.I. Gurdjieff's All and Everything trilogy. The first was the 3 books that were part, which is the one book, the 3 books in one. It was the book, The Belize Tales to His Grandson. We've already read that. That was like 1,200 pages over 46 weeks, rounding up.
Yeah.
It was amazeballs and then some. There are no words. I highly recommend you experience it for yourself. Thrice, as Gurdjieff would say in the first chapter. So here we are in the second series of the trilogy, and this consists of, I believe, 2 books within this one book. This book is called Meetings with Remarkable Men. As we said, it's the second volume in the All and Everything trilogy, written by the man himself, the Greek Armenian spiritual teacher G.I. Gurdjieff. It's autobiographical in nature. Gurdjieff started working on the Russian manuscript shortly before his death, revising it several times over the coming years. And the English translation, by the way, was done by A.R. Orage, and it came to a quarter of a century later, which is interesting, because the translation of Belize's Tales to His Grandson was handpicked by Gurdjieff himself across 20 different languages, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So what is this autobiographical in nature book about? Let's hear what this book review says about it. I have it in the invite here. Just to give a little background, because we never did really do a formal introduction. This exhilarating, life-affirming call to spiritual arms from world-renowned spiritual teacher G.I. Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff's voice is heard as a call. He calls because he suffers from the inner chaos in which we live. He calls to us to open our eyes. He asks us why we are here, what we wish for, and what forces we obey. He asks us, above all, if we understand what we are. Part adventure, narrative, part travelogue, part spiritual guide. Meetings with remarkable men is suffused with Gurdjieff's unique perspective on life. And just so you know, when he says men, he's talking about mankind, because there is at least one female in here, and I believe she escaped slavery in one of these interviews. So this book was published in 1963, and I believe we left off on page 15. Before we get into the text, a little recap on the reading last week. I mean, what does anybody want to jump in? I know what stands out most to me so profoundly, not surprisingly.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would like a bit of a recap since I missed the
No worries.
I missed the event. Yeah.
Well, I would say, what stood out for me. Welcome. Happy Friday. We're in this Gurdjieff King. I see people are coming in. So what stood out for me in last week's reading was, not surprisingly, has to do with a word. And language and linguistics. And how over time we tend to dumb down such things. So what Gurdjieff was speaking on specifically was when he was studying, he was studying many languages. He was part of his learned experience, and he tried to find the word. He was studying the Russian language, and he was trying to find the word or the way to say. Okay, and he couldn't find a way to say. Okay, so for example, serious. To say that you want to read this book, it really tells me a lot. So this is using to say as an example, right? Or even to say as a verb, right? So in Francais, in any language, you conjugate verbs like to say, said, he said, I said, he said, she said, they said, we said, the whole conjugation of verbs. In other languages can get especially French, okay? Don't get me started. It can get very complicated. So back to the focus here. So he couldn't find the verb to say. All he could find was to speak. Okay? And this was really it hit me immediately. It was like smelling bacon, you know what I mean? I immediately recognized where he was going with this. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with Belize Bob's Tales to his grandson. And so he went in deep on it. And I mean, what I pick up on it out of the gate is akin to listen and to hear. Very different things, right? You can hear someone all day long, but are you listening? You know what I mean? Like, are you truly listening? You can hear a noise and not even notice. Like right now, I can hear a clock ticking when I'm paying attention, when I'm listening for it, right? Like when I listen, I can hear it. Well, you see, now I'm getting confused now. So what is the difference now? So when to hear something, it doesn't mean you can listen, that you're listening to it. A sound is a sound, but a meaning is what you listen. It's like, it's to listen, it's listening, right? When you're listening, you're giving your attention.
Intentional
Yeah.
So
focus and awareness. Yeah.
It's
right.
more
So
like comprehensional focus.
yes. So
Hmm.
to speak and to say, are not the same. So to further explain, he did even more recon and found that in the hills and the countryside of Russia, they still had a word for to say. So
Okay.
therein lies how the modernization or bastardization, I mean, I don't even know if that's even appropriate to say anymore, the watering down, the dilution of language really has an effect on the way we communicate. And the way we communicate is how we connect to each other. Okay. And I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, because it struck me so much because I wasn't just hearing what I was saying, I was listening to what I was reading out loud. And it was like, wow. And I can't tell you in true Gurdjieff fashion, all throughout the week, I'm seeing all these examples of to speak and to say, to listen to hear. Like it was insane. And I kept bringing it up uh, because it called it to action. So that is my recap personally of the amazing reading last week.
Okay.
That
So,
really resonated with me. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know, Water Bear, would you go ahead?
before you read, I like to say that I think we're starting to think somewhat alike when you say that, because when I see the word to say and to speak, I feel like speaking is you're casting a comprehensive way of saying something into a direction, while just saying something is blurting out something, but it's not
That's
always
interesting. I think it's the
said.
opposite though, because when you speak, that's interesting though, because from a magician, you speak something to existence, but do you know what you're saying though? That is
Yes,
the deeper. See, but listen
yes.
to what I'm saying though. To
Okay.
speak something is la 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 la, but to know what you're saying though, like
Hmm. Okay. I mean, I could see it at that angle. The reason why I think it's reverse is because when you're speaking something, you're not just blurting thing out. When I speak, it's like I say it directly on that subject matter instead of being indirect. Because when people say stuff, they're being more indirect because they're in their thinking brain when they speak, not in their so they're not in their prefrontal or intuitive brain. Because a lot of people, when they say something, they say what they think more than what they actually know. When you're speaking to someone in an intelligent way, you're actually using what you know emotionally. That's why I say it like that.
so. Let's look at the definitions. Speak, to say something in order to convey information, an opinion, or a feeling, to serve as evidence for something. Okay, to
Yeah.
say, utter words as to convey information, an opinion, a feeling, an intention, or instruction. Assume something in order to work out what its consequences would be. Make a hypothesis used to express surprise or draw attention to a remark or a question, an opportunity
Okay.
for stating one's opinion or feelings. There's a lot. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's subjective though. I mean,
But it can be. I think that's the point.
I know a lot of people who speak a lot, and I don't really think they know what they're saying.
No, there's a reason for that. It's because they're speaking from their thinking brain. And when you're speaking from your thinking brain, you're just going
You're
to
not
blurt.
saying.
No, no, you're saying it's just like it just you're saying it. It's just that you're not saying it in a meaningful way. To me, when a magician speaks, right, and as someone who's lived it for 20 years, we speak in a way where we don't just say something like blurtedly. We say it contextually within an understanding of emotional intelligence with logistical intelligence. For someone who's been doing spell casting, that's actually how you cast a spell. Okay? Is that you have to spell out the word and the meaning as you speak it and speak it.
Okay, then why did Beyonce's lyrics say my name, instead of speak my name, speak my name? I'm just saying.
Okay.
If you want to take it to the B, we could take it.
Let's take it to the B. Let's take it to Beyonce. The reason why she wants that song "Say My Name" is because what she's saying is say my name if you know my name, because I don't want you to say someone else's name in your tongue.
Okay. All right.
You know? And that's like saying.
Well, let's see where Gurdjieff takes it.
Okay,
let's see where he takes it.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing. You took it to Beyonce already. Let's go.
I love it. We took it to Bay.
Yeah,
what did Bay say?
On the walls. You took it to the writings on the walls, Beyonce. Okay, Destiny Child, Beyonce. I remember those days.
So, Water Bear, where's the recap that you're talking about? Recap this post and everything above it. Okay, I see it right here. All right, everything above it. Okay. So, do you want to read through this series, or do you want me to take it, or anybody else?
Let me have a look.
Hmm?
So is it at the beginning of page 17?
He posted in Gurdjieff event notes. He's giving a recap. He says,
"Oh, the recap.
Water
Sorry.
Bear." Yeah, the Water Bear. Here, I'll stay serious.
Yeah, I had a look.
I figured since it would be good for you to read it because it helps you to also catch up. So if you click on what I just tagged you in Gurdjieff event notes, it's like right under Ask AI. You can click on that and then click on Water Bear's reference link. Pardon me, and then it's gonna just scroll up and it begins underneath the text the image of the page. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna need some help in this too if I want to read, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so listen in. You came in late, so you missed a very detailed intro, which is okay. So I would settle in and listen. Sirius is about to share the Water Bears recap. So I just shared mine. Top line, what resonated with me, and now the Sirius is about to go in with the Water Bears recap of last week.
Okay, so should I begin?
I want to make a note of
so I think it begins where the Water Bear shared some like an extract of the passage about the mind of the contemporary man.
I don't know. I'm looking at. I don't know. I think it begins here. No. I think it begins at under where I posted the last page where we have the rocket ships. So it's
at everything above it. So that's why I went to look above.
Yeah, that's okay. Here, I'm gonna go like this at Sirius, so it's easier for you because it is convoluted a little bit because we got a lot of stuff going in there. So look at the bottom of the channel and click on that. That'll take you to the first text of his recap.
Okay. So what the Water Bear has to say, so he said, basically, I want to make a note that Big G, or Gurdjieff, is super critical towards contemporary man, but not in a dismissive way, as the contemporary man does when someone brings up higher thought. Big G is critical of the contemporary man in the sense that for him, the contemporary man is flawed, missing something of critical importance. Anything you learn well, you learn through quantity first. And once its basics are learned, then by sheer quality alone, big leaps of progress can be made in little to no time. regular reading and writing makes one an original thinker. Those are meditative pursuits. Common malphonic concert. He's not giving us a piece of his mind. He's sharing his being truthfully. Most quarrels are born out of simple miscommunication that arise from bad language skills, bad thinking, which then leads to bad thought quality or depth, and language skill correspond to each other. An unexamined life is not worth living. So that was by Socrates. Saying is directly addressing someone. Speaking is doing it in an indirect way or passively. And then truth can only be realized, cannot be taught. Is there anything else there that?
Yeah, I would finish that whole thing right there. The majority is always all the way through to the thing at the bottom of the pictures.
So the majority is always wrong. The minority is rarely right, and that was by Hendrik Ibsen. I find Gurdjieff guilty of some of the things he criticizes other literary writers for, like stylizing their writing. But I enjoy it, and a good thing Gurdjieff does it for a deeper reason. I feel he proclaims so. That's my experience too. When sometimes I bring up foreign cultural references, many folks say, hey, they do that in that country. But I felt it from a very young age that all people have the same original wants, which boil down to a need for love. And then the blessing is ever present. It is up to us to allow. I am basking in the afterglow of Gurdjieff. And that was by Sheba.
Okay.
Yeah, that's he quoted me.
Okay.
So that's Water Bear's very wealthy recap of last week. Thank you so much for your efforts and for your readings. Serious.
Oh my God. Well, before you guys...
You had something to say? Go ahead.
Before you guys start, when it comes to Gurdjieff, like the first book, I felt my writings of will and feelings matter came into a oneness, and also his reading style was very emotionally intelligent, but logistically trying. It's like I was doing brain exercises while I was reading contextually, because for someone, like I said, who's been learning how to cast spells and shit and knows certain laws of magic with your tongue, it really gave me an exercise, and it also helped me to understand feelings matter from the 3 brain connection within that book too. And it also helped me to understand that the will is the divine feminist and the divine feminine of our souls and our energy on earth, which is also called Urantia. So
my suggestion is to read the whole book, because I know, intermittent exposure and trying to read Belize Bob's Tales to his grandson, like just, a handful of time in and out, it's very different experience than the way Gurdjieff writes and the way it's formulated. It's not something to come in like, it's not written to take a chapter here and a chapter there, or not even that, just if you take back and look back at your experience of consuming this material, it's more of an experience
Yeah.
It's designed as an experience. It's multi-dimensional, faceted, layered.
Yeah.
So my advice is to, fully dedicate the time and space, if you're interested, to the Belize Bob's Tales to his grandson to get a full experience. But I'm
Yeah.
glad that you've tied into some parallels to other works that you're reading,
Yes.
and maybe this will continue that.
Yes, it will, because I've learned, even from the right use of will and feelings matter. Which I'm almost done reading that book on my group, by the way. So if you guys want to come in for admin privilege, let me know. Secondly, what I've learned from feelings matter and the right use of will is that there's an emotional will and there's a mechanical will. And I think what Gurdjieff is doing, as I've heard you guys read, is creating a mechanical way to use our right use of will to create the emotional intelligence we want in our omnipresent conscious state. As I read this,
Well,
that's what I'm feeling.
let's find out.
Okay.
Well, you haven't read it yet, so welcome to Gurdjieff Gang 7. This is our third session, so you're coming in late, but that's okay. And sit back and enjoy the ride.
Okay.
So we're on page 15.
Hmm?
Let's start at the second paragraph. I'll go ahead and kick us off, and then we can pass on the reading. If someone could keep it serious, I don't know if you want to, or if someone could volunteer to keep an eye. The water bear and Rick, I don't know if they're going to be speaking. And I know the water bear specifically is very active in the chat. So if somebody could keep their eyes on Lotus Lounge or, wherever he's going to be writing, that'd be great.
Where are you going, Sheba?
So we're on page 15.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't already have the text, I will post it in the Lotus Lounge chat. Bam, bam. Voila. It's in the VC chat box.
Yeah.
Without further ado, let's go. Any questions before we get started? No? Fabulous. Jumping in the text. It is interesting to note, I'm backtracking a couple paragraphs just for context sake, so jumping in the text.
Yeah.
It is interesting to notice that this word has been preserved even up to the present time, but is used. You know what? Let's go back even a little bit more because the word.
I know.
Let's go back one paragraph above. So the bottom of page 14, bottom paragraph. In fact, the second to the bottom, just for context.
I know. I get where we're at.
I must tell you here that when I began to study Russian grammar and also the grammars of several other modern languages, in order to determine the causes of these numerous incongruities, I decided, being in general attracted to philology, to acquaint myself also with the history of the origins and development of the Russian language. And my study of its history proved to me that formerly it had contained exactly corresponding words for all the experienced actions already fixed in the process of the life of people. And it was only when this language, having reached a relatively high degree of development in this course of centuries, became in its turn an object for the sharpening of the beaks of ravens, that is to say, an object of wiseacring for various illiterate upstarts, that many words were distorted or even entirely ceased to be used, merely because their consonants did not answer to the requirements of civilized grammar. Among these latter was the very word I searched for, which exactly corresponded to our diatom, and which was then pronounced. Oh my God, this is the Russian word again. Gazivi- Gazivayu.
Hold on.
Gazivayu.
Hold on.
Gazivayu. I'm trying to make it Russian.
I know.
Gazivayu.
Hold on.
It is interesting to notice that this word has been preserved even up to the present time, but is used, and in the sense exactly corresponding to its meaning, only by people, although they belong to the Russian nation, happen to be isolated from the effects of present-day civilization, that is to say, by people of various country districts situated far from any center of culture. This artificially invented grammar of the languages of today, which the younger generation everywhere is now compelled to learn, is, in my opinion, one of the fundamental causes of the fact that among contemporary European people, only one of the three independent data necessary for obtaining a sane human mind has developed, namely their so-called thought, which tends to predominate in their individuality, whereas without feeling and instinct, as every man with a normal reason must know, the real understanding accessible to man cannot be formed. To sum up everything that has been said about the literature of our times, I cannot find better words to describe it than the expression, "it has no soul." Contemporary civilization has destroyed the soul of literature, as of everything else to which it has turned its gracious attention. I have all the more grounds for criticizing so mercilessly the result of modern civilization, since, according to the most reliable historical data, which have come down to us from remote antiquity, we have definite information that the literature of former civilizations had indeed a great deal to assist in the development of the mind of man, and the results of this development, transmitted from generation to generation, could still be felt even centuries later. In my opinion, the quintessence of an idea can sometimes be very well transmitted by others by means of certain antidotes and proverbs formed by life. So, in the present case, in order to show the difference between key literature of former civilizations and the contemporary, I wish to make use of an antidote very widely known among us in Persia, entitled "The Conversation of the Two Sparrows." And this antidote, it is said that once upon a time, on the cornice of a high house sat two sparrows, one old, the other young. They were discussing an event which had become the burning question of the day among the sparrows, and which had resulted from the mullah's housekeeper having had just previously thrown out of a window onto a place where the sparrows gathered to play something looking like leftover porridge, but which turned out to be chopped cork, and several of the young and as yet experienced sparrows had sampled it and almost burst. While talking about this, the old sparrow, suddenly ruffling himself up, began with a pained grimace to search under his wing for the fleas tormenting him, and which in general breed on underfed sparrows, and having caught one, he said with a deep sigh, "Times have changed very much. There is no longer a living to be had for our fraternity. In the old days we used to sit, just as now, somewhere upon a roof quietly dozing, when suddenly down in the street there would be heard a noise, a rattling and a rumbling, and soon after an odor would be diffused, at which everything inside us would begin to rejoice, because we felt fully certain that when we flew down and searched the places where all that had happened, we would find satisfaction for our essential needs. But nowadays there is plenty and to spare of noise and rattlings and all sorts of rumblings, And again, an odor is also diffused, but an odor which it is almost impossible to endure. And when sometimes, by force of old habit, we fly down during a moment's lull to seek something substantial for ourselves, then search as we may with tense attention, we find nothing at all except some nauseous drops of burned oil. This tale, as is surely evident to you, refers to the old horse-drawn vehicles and to the present-day automobile. And although these latter and the old sparrow said produce even more noise, rumblings, rattlings, and smell than the former, in spite of all this, they have no significance whatever for the feeding of sparrows. And without food, as you yourself will understand, it is difficult, even for sparrows, to bring forth a healthy posterity. This antidote seems to me an ideal illustration of what I wished to point out about the difference between contemporary civilization and the civilization of past epochs. In the present civilization, as in former civilizations, literature exists for the purpose of the perfecting of humanity in general. But in this field also, as in everything else contemporary, there is nothing substantial for our essential aim. It is all exterior, all only as in the tale of the old sparrow, noise, rattling, and a nauseous smell. For any impartial man, this viewpoint of mine can be conclusively confirmed by observing the difference between the degree of development of feeling in people who are born and spend their whole lives on the continent of Asia and in people born and educated in the conditions of contemporary civilization on the continent of Europe. It is a fact noted by a great many people that among all the present-day inhabitants of the continent of Asia who, owing to geographical and other conditions, are isolated from the effects of modern civilization, feeling has reached a much higher level of development than among any of the inhabitants of Europe. And since feeling is the foundation of common sense, these Asiatic people, in spite of having less general knowledge, have a more correct notion of any object they observe than those belonging to the very what is this word here? Themas of contemporary civilization.
Yeah.
Like Europeans' understanding of an object observed by him is formed exclusively by means of an all-around, so to say, mathematical informedness about it, whereas most of the people in Asia grasp the essence of the object observed by them sometimes with their feelings alone, and sometimes even solely by instinct. At this point in his speech about contemporary literature, this intelligent elderly Persian, among other things, touched on a question which at the present time is interesting. Many Europeans, as they are called, propagators of culture.
Wow. It's really a lot to speak of, because they did propagate their culture for so long in Africa and in the early Americas, even parts of Asia later. Yeah, I can see why he said this.
Yep. He then said, the people of Asia were at one time greatly interested in European literature, but soon feeling all the emptiness of its content, they gradually lost interest in it, and now it is scarcely read there at all. In the weakening of their interest in European literature, The chief part, in my opinion, was played by the branch of modern writing known by the name of novels. These famous novels of theirs consist mainly, as I have already said, of long descriptions in various forms of the course of a malady which has arisen among contemporary people, in which, owing to their weakness and willlessness, lasts a rather long time.
Damn, that's a fucked up way of saying they do not have any flavor or emotional intelligence into their acknowledgement of things. And that's like a wrong use of will motif. So yes, I was right the whole time.
Well, he's talking about writers and
Yes.
entertainment novels like this, fictional storylines that are cookie cutters.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
He talks about this a lot in Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, actually the first chapter.
Yes.
As he explains how he's not a writer.
No. But what I'm saying is the same thing he's seeing now is also what's been happening in the medias and in the cultures from the European all over America. And it's been a thing that's been happening ever since the Americana boom in America itself in the 1950s and 60s, when radio turned into video. And there's a song called Video Killed the Radio Star. It's kind of a dedication to that, Sheba.
Yeah, this book was written was published in 65.
Yeah. So it was in the 5 years.
That said, it was 20 years after, he wrote it, which was, I think, from the beginning of this forward, which we're just on the forward. It was, I think, a month after he finished Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, which would be the 40s, which would be 1945.
Yes, which is a few years after the settlement of World War II in the Americas. Reading the aftermath, because after the aftermath,
he definitely speaks of America.
Yeah, I know he does. I'm just saying that in a way to give some conclusional text to my brain right now, because when I listen to that song, "Video Killed the Radio Star," that's what it gets me back to.
Nice.
Yeah.
The Asiatic people, who are not as yet so far removed from Mother Nature, recognize with their consciousness that this psychic state, which arises in both men and women, is unworthy of human beings in general, and is particularly degrading for a man. And instinctively, they assume an attitude of contempt towards such people. And as regards the other branches of European literature, such as the scientific, the descriptive, and other forms of instructive exposition, the Asiatic, having lost to a lesser degree the ability to feel, that is to say, standing closer to nature, consciously feels and instinctively senses the writer's complete lack of any knowledge of reality and of any genuine understanding of the subject he is writing about.
Ego much, tank much, echo chamber much.
And so, because of all this, the Asiatic people, after first manifesting a great interest in European literature, gradually stopped paying any attention to it, and at the present time disregard it completely, whereas among the European peoples, the shelves of their public and private libraries and bookshops are groaning from the daily increasing number of new books. The question must doubtless arise in many of you as to how what I have just said can be reconciled with the fact that an overwhelming majority of the people of Asia are illiterate in the strict sense of the word.
What the fuck? Okay.
This is a family program. It would be great if we kept it PG.
Sorry, but what in the literal...
Serious?
Greek.
Did you want to jump in? Yeah, in the strict sense of the word, illiterate.
Yeah.
The majority of people in Asia at this time. Yes,
Okay.
he's saying
Okay.
a fact.
It's a fact. The only reason why they're probably like that at the time is because they didn't feel like they needed to read in the same style as a European.
He's not insulting them. He's stating fact.
All right.
So let the words continue.
Go ahead.
Did you want to jump in, Sirius?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Go for it.
Right. To this, I will answer that nevertheless, the real cause of the lack of interest in contemporary literature lies in its own shortcomings. I myself have seen how hundreds of illiterate people will gather round one literate man to hear a reading of the sacred writings or of the tales known as the 1001 Nights. He will, of course, reply that the events described, particularly in these tales, are taken from their own life, and are therefore understandable and interesting to them. But that is not the point. These texts, as I speak particularly of 1001 Nights, are works of literature in the full sense of the word. Anyone reading or hearing this book feels clearly that everything in it is fantasy, but fantasy corresponding to truth, even though composed of episodes which are quite improbable for the ordinary life of people. The interest of the reader or listener is awakened and enchanted by the author's fine understanding of the psyche of people of all walks of life around him. He follows with curiosity how little by little a whole story is formed out of these small incidents of actual life.
And 1 second, we've got from the chat, Lotus Lounge, we've got the Water Bear saying, too bad many contemporary scientists, philosophers, intellectuals deny the small but effectual significance of antidotes and proverbs of individuals. And Hermes says, honestly, I've been awake for far too long to do a reading without making a mistake. I'm running on fumes right now. No worries. Sit back and listen and enjoy.
Thank you.
You are very much welcome. And Water Bear says, I live in Asia. I personally know some people here who are completely illiterate but are more socially and politically gifted than other individuals who have master's degrees in intellectually demanding subjects such as humanities. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Water Bear, hear, hear.
Here is right.
Alright, so the requirements of contemporary civilization have engendered yet another quite specific form of literature called journalism. I cannot pass by in silence this new form of literature, since, aside from the fact that it offers nothing whatsoever for the development of the mind, it has, from my point of view, become the fundamental evil in the life of people today because of the poisonous influence it exerts on their mutual relations. This form of literature has become very widespread in recent times because, according to my unshakable conviction, it answers more completely than anything else to the weaknesses and demands which lead to the ever-increasing willlessness of man. It thus accelerates in people the atrophy of even their last possibilities for acquiring those data which formerly still gave them a certain relative cognizance of their own individuality, which alone leads to what we call remembering oneself. That absolutely necessary factor in the process of self-perfecting.
Hey, hold on a second. Why is it that way, even in the now, with this journalism that's evolved? Because honestly, if it's creating a willlessness ever increasingly, how can we create something that's more willful? Because that is the key to emotional
Well,
intelligence.
this is what he's getting at.
Okay,
Well, this is what he's getting at.
okay.
hmm
I'm just wondering.
And you made a comment, Ramiel, that honestly, this is boring because honestly, it is obviously why I tell scientists that in Europe and America, they alive no emo intel.
Yeah, they have no emotional intelligence. That's just my code word for that. They have no emotional.
So why is this boring?
It's boring because, I mean, I'm not saying the book is boring. I'm saying the way science is boring to me because it doesn't have that emotional flavor that I am used to when I see things omnipresently. Because when I see certain functionalities, right, it doesn't explain the whole is in a way that I can digest it from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It doesn't have a pattern. It's just all meshed up. It doesn't have a harmony.
Got it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sirius.
Besides, owing to this unprincipled daily literature, the thinking functioning of people has come to be even further separated from their individuality, and thereby conscience, or conscience, which was occasionally awakened in them, has now ceased to participate in this thinking of theirs. They are thus deprived from those factors which formerly gave people a more or less tolerable life, if only in respect of their mutual relations. To our common misfortune, this journalistic literature, which is becoming more widespread in the life of people year by year, weakens the already weakened mind of man still more by laying it open without resistance to all kinds of deceit and delusion, and leads it astray from relatively well-founded thinking, thus stimulating in people, instead of sane judgment, various unworthy properties such as incredulity,
Yeah.
Incredulity. Well done.
Indignation, fear, false shame,
Ooh.
hypocrisy, pride, and so on and so forth.
Ooh. Okay, I gotta stop right here. When I write what I said about think tank echo chamber, that's a problem. Because what a think tank does, it keeps you in a state of thinking that the echo chamber can't let you go limbic into that. So it's like it blocks your limbic development of a subject or a thought, and you're stuck in the imaginative for a very high period of time. Because it's just like the definition of a complete sentence, which is basically a group of words that expresses a complete thought. It kind of destroys the way of saying and speaking sometimes. It sometimes only sticks to one or the other. That's why I said the same thing that I said in the very beginning, Sheba, when it comes to saying and speaking from a magicianal point of view. But get that out of my system.
All right.
Can we get back to Gurdjieff? You got it out your system? Fabulous.
Yes.
In order to portray to you more concretely all of the maleficent all the maleficence of people of this new form of literature, I will tell you about several events which took place on account of newspapers, the reality of which was for me beyond all doubt, as by chance I had personally taken part in them. In Tehran, I had a certain close friend, an Armenian, who some time before his death had made me his executor. He had a son, no longer young, who, on account of his business, lived with his numerous family in a large European city. One sad evening, after having eaten their supper, he and the members of his family all fell ill and died before morning. As executor for the family, I was obliged to go to the place where this tragic event had occurred. I found out that just before this event, the father of this unfortunate family had read long articles for several days in succession in one of the various newspapers he received about a butcher shop where, according to these articles, special sausages were made from genuine products in some particular way. At the same time, he kept coming across large advertisements of this new butcher shop in all the newspapers. Finally, all this so tempted him that, although neither he nor his family cared for sausages very much, as all of them had been raised in Armenia where sausages are not eaten, he went and bought some. And having had these sausages for supper that same evening, all the family were mortally poisoned. My suspicions having been aroused by this extraordinary occurrence, I succeeded a little later, with the cooperation of an agent of the private secret police, in bringing to light the following. Some large firm had acquired, at a low price from an export concern, an enormous consignment of sausages originally destined for a foreign country, which had been rejected owing to a delay in shipment. To get rid of the entire consignment as quickly as possible, this firm spared no expense on reporters to whom it entrusted this maleficent campaign in the newspapers. Another occurrence. During one of my stays in Baku, I myself, for several days in succession, read in the local newspapers obtained by my nephew, lengthy articles taking up nearly half the entire paper, which went into ecstasies about the marvels performed by some famous actress. So much was written about her, and in such a handsome way, that even I, an old man, was, as it is said, fired by it all, and one evening, putting off everything I had to do, and changing my established evening regime, I went to the theatre to see this wonder. And what do you think I saw? Something corresponding, even in the slightest, to what had been written about her in these articles which filled up half the paper? Nothing of the sort. I had seen, in my day, many representatives of this art, both the good and the bad, and without exaggeration, I can say that for some time I had been considered a great authority on these matters. But even without taking into consideration my personal views on art in general, and speaking merely from an ordinary standpoint, I must confess that in all my life, I had never seen anybody to compare with this celebrity for lack of talent and absence even of the most elementary notions of the principles of playing a role. In all her manifestations on the stage, there was such a complete lack of any kind of presence that I personally, even if aroused to altruism, would not have permitted such a wonder to fill the role of kitchen maid in my kitchen. As I afterwards learnt, one of the typical oil refiners of Baku, who had happened to make a fortune, had paid several reporters a good round sum as a bribe, promising to double it if they would succeed in making a celebrity of his private lady love, who up till then had been chambermaid in the house of a Russian engineer, and whom he had seduced, taking advantage of business appointments with this engineer. One more example. In a wide circulated German newspaper I read, from time to time, lofty pain graphics glorifying a certain painter, and owing to these articles I formed the opinion that in contemporary art this painter was simply a phenomenon. My nephew, having just built a house in the town of Baku, had decided, in preparation for his wedding, to decorate the interior very, very richly. Since twice that year, he had unexpectedly struck oil with signs of increasing output, with which would assure him a considerable fortune. I advised him not to spare his money, but to send for that famous painter to superintend the decoration of the house and to paint some frescoes on the walls. In this way, his expenditures, already very great, would at least be of benefit to his posterity, and would inherit these frescoes and other works by the hand of this incomparable master. And my nephew did so. He even went himself to invite this great European painter. And soon afterwards, the painter arrived, bringing with him a whole train of assistants, artisans, and even, it seemed to me, his own harem. Of course, in the European sense of the word, and without the slightest hurry, he finally set to work. The result of the work of this celebrity was that, firstly, the day of the wedding had to be postponed, and secondly, no little money had to be spent to bring everything back to its original state, so that simple Persian artisans might decorate, paint, and embellish everything in a way more corresponding to genuine artistry. In the present case, to give them their due, the reporters participated in building up the career of this mediocre painter, almost disinterestedly, simply as comrades and modest sideline workers.
Just for 1 second to jump out of the text, I mean, he's going on a laundry list of examples of representation. I mean, I think going back to the initial one where he's speaking of the sausages that killed everyone, right? This was a rush. This is a prime, I think, example of, capitalistic, like extreme capitalism.
Yeah.
So it was more about being able to get the greatest yield of profit, in comparison to your initial investment. And, we can see that in just present day here being the, February 24th, 2023, with the train wreck in Ohio, and how things could have been done to prevent that in terms of, preventative measures and higher standards and regulation, and bring things more from a safety preventative measure instead of now dealing with a catastrophe that's not only about the wreckage but also the damage it's doing to generations to come in terms of soil quality and these toxic chemicals now being exposed to people, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So again, as usual, it's so relevant to present day.
Okay, well before you guys read, I'm sorry to have to say this. I do gotta go, but I hope you guys do well.
Thanks.
Take care. Should I go back in or?
Sure. I mean, if nobody has anything else to say, for sure. I mean, he's giving a laundry list of examples of these. I love how he does that, though. He really paints the picture, of how we compromise, quality for quantity, how we compromise beingness and humanity for the sake of tangible, goods or returns. Yes.
Yeah.
Quantifiable. It's all about the measuring, the quantification. It's okay, let's count the beans. Let's count the beans. This is the bean counters, the accounting of things. Yes. Not saying that it's wrong. Life is about balance. Where's the balance? Yes.
And like, especially what sticks out to me as well is like, in this age that we're in right now of, like this boom in information and the misinformation, disinformation, the deception, it's like literally he's speaking to this, like what we're experiencing right now as well, which is very topical. So, yeah.
Water Bear he's saying something here. In the 60s, the profession of acting was going through a mini renaissance. He's speculating here. Also remember, Water Bear, this book wasn't written in the 60s. It was published in 65, which was 20 years after he had written it in, I think it's Russian, actually, oddly enough. I always started this whole session. I think he originally wrote it in Russian because it wasn't translated into English until 20 years later, unlike Belzebub's Tales to his grandson. So it's something to take into consideration. But the Water Bear here has provided some food for thought about the Renaissance here. The Russian theater practitioner. He's got the plot of Transporter 3. He says, go through the list, post sausages, antidote, again kindly, if not a fuss, it is. So he's quoting the text here. Some large turn had acquired at a low price from an export concern an enormous consignment of sausages originally designed for a foreign country, which had been rejected owing to a delay in shipment. To get rid of the entire consignment as quickly as possible, this firm spared no expense on reporters to whom it entrusted this maleficent campaign in the newspapers. So let me just click on it here. He's quoting the text and he's saying it's the same as Transporter 3 in that Transporter 3 film synopsis, the mob courier Frank Martin. Its latest assignment pairs him with Valentina, the cynical daughter of a Ukraine official. While her father ponders what to do with 3 boatloads of toxic waste, Frank must guard the problematic woman and prevent her from wandering too far from his vehicle or risk triggering the explosive shackles they both wear. I agree. These are, definitely core storylines throughout time. And he's got this 1936. An actor prepares. This is a book by Konstantin Stanislavski. It's a book on acting. I'm familiar. Yep. So it's interesting. It's an interesting point for sure.
Yeah. I continue?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. So, as a last example, I will tell you a sad story of misunderstanding, which was due this time to a big shot of a contemporary, especially pernicious literature. One day, when I was living in the town of Khorasan, I met at the house of a mutual acquaintances a young European couple, and soon got to know them rather well. They came to Khorasan several times, but each time only for a short stay. Traveling with his young wife, this new friend of mine was collecting all kinds of information in many countries and making analyses to determine the effects of nicotine in various climates. After collecting the data he needed on this question in several Asiatic countries, he returned with his wife to Europe, where he began to write a long book on the results of his research. But since his young wife, obviously owing to her youth and inexperience as regards the necessity of preparing for what are called rainy days, had spent all their resources during these travels of theirs, she was compelled, in order to give her husband the possibility of finishing his book, to take employment as a typist in the office of a large publishing house. There often came into this office a certain literary critic who met her there and, having, as it is said, fallen in love with her, tried simply for the satisfaction of his lust to get on intimate terms with her. But she, an honourable wife who knew her duty, would not yield to his advances. But while in this faithful wife of a European husband, morality continued to triumph, there was nourished in this loathsome contemporary type, in proportion to the non-satisfaction of his lust, the desire for vengeance usual in such people. And by all sorts of intrigues, he succeeded in getting her dismissed from her employment for no reason whatsoever. Then, when her husband, my young friend, had finished his book and published it, this specific ulcer of our times, because of his resentment, began to write in the newspaper to which he contributed, and also in other newspapers and periodicals, a whole series of articles containing all sorts of false statements, which discredited the book so completely that it was a total failure. That is to say, no one became interested in it or bought it. And so, thanks to one of these unconscionable representatives of this unprincipled literature, things came to such a pass that this honest worker and his beloved wife, having spent their last resources and not having even the wherewithal to buy bread, by mutual pact, hanged themselves. From my point of view, these literary critics, owing to the influence of their authority as writers, and on general mass of naive and easily suggestible people, are 1,000 times more pernicious than all these slobbering boy reporters. I myself knew a music critic who had never once in his life touched a musical instrument, and therefore had no practical understanding of music. He did not even know what sound was in general, or the difference between the notes do and re. But owing to the established abnormalities of contemporary civilization, he goodness, just lost my place.
It's okay. He somehow occupied you were on page 24 in the third paragraph down.
Thanks.
After do and re, but owing to the established abnormalities.
Yep, thanks. But owing to the established abnormalities of contemporary civilization, he somehow occupied the responsible post of music critic, and thus became an authority for all readers of well-established and widely circulated newspaper. And it was, of course, according to his quite illiterate indications, that unshakable opinions were formed in all his readers on the question of music. that question, which should in reality be like a beacon of light for the correct understanding of one of the aspects of truth. The public never knows who is writing. It only knows the newspaper itself, which belongs to a group of experienced businessmen.
If we could just stop there for a second and really process this, this couldn't be even more relevant today. I mean, we are living here in 2023. The big boulder tumbling down the hill, the snowball, right? From all of this type of stuff, it's insane. It's like, even film critics, have they ever even picked up a camera? Do they even and even ones that have gone to film school, I've never been to film school, so I can't speak to that, but I mean, there's something to be said about, going with your inherent talent for storytelling, without the formalities. There's a place for that. Why is everything measured on, and here's the word again, measured on technicality, and not understood on a soul level? To Waterbury's point, and obviously Gurdjieff's, there are so many wise, illiterate people. This goes back to even talking about indigenous people and how they're forsaken and treated as barbarians and uncouth and uncivilized, and to be said uncivilized, like that's a bad thing. There's so much we can learn from each other, and there's strength in all our differences. And regardless of one's IQ, EQ, elemental P, it doesn't matter. P, okay, it's we are all people living a human condition along this journey, and there's something all of us can relate to in each other. There's more in common than not, number one. And number two, there's so much to learn from each other. And there is no better than, less than, greater than, less than, better. It's all subjective. And it's interesting because, we experienced what Gurdjieff is talking about now just in this session, actually. Just taking a glance at work and then judging it and reprimanding it and then identifying by it. That's solely led by ego and not taking into, the holistic. There's, you got to listen to, you can hear it, but are you listening, right?
Yeah.
It's just very profound what he's saying here, because we don't know who these even on the news, they're just poke holes. Like, they're just reading a teleprompt, that's been written for them. Some reporters have journalistic, at least there's some iota maybe of journalistic integrity, but at the end of the day, they still have to speak a narrative that's been approved top down, and so many eyeballs have looked at it. And I mean, even on social media, when you're looking at things like, we had this discussion recently about what happened with Google's ChatGPT competitor. I forget the name of it now, because, darn it, I don't remember. But there was a faux pas in the demoing of it, and they ended up losing the Alphabet company, which is the parent company to Google and YouTube. They ended up losing $100 billion.
Google?
Correct. In the next day in the stock exchange, because their equivalent, I don't know, his name is like Stanley. I don't remember what the AI's name is. I can't think of it right now, which I could really kick myself because it's annoying. It's a great point to prove. But in rolling this out and in demoing it live on Twitter, there was an example where they had a father. First of all, this went through all the PR companies, like I'm telling you, the agencies, the creative agencies. This is part of a larger campaign rollout, especially with a company as ridiculously prominent as the Alphabet company, let alone in the industry of intelligence. I mean, come on. And they're launching this AI on social media, Twitter, to the world. they're demoing it. You don't think they've combed that through and through all the eyeballs, especially gauging sensitivity on AI itself, and how, there have been test groups and how they react to AI and what would be the best way to position the AI. The list goes on and on and on. They hammered this nail down, okay? And guess what happened? So they depicted a father asking AI about a specific telescope. I don't know what the name of it is. Forgive me.
It's called Bard. And I just looked it up.
Yeah, Bard. Well done, Bard. So the telescope Bard, and the AI Bard. So the father asked Bard, please tell me some examples of the latest, greatest things the XYZ telescope has captured, so I can tell my 8-year-old daughter, something like that. Very family oriented, showing that you can use our AI as even a extension of your parenting to educate your children. Like, it's such an important thing that they're demoing, right? And guess what? There were a handful of things that it listed that this telescope has been fruitful in providing most recently, and one of them was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. Is it wrong? So this is with this climate of misinformation and fake news and all this stuff. This is the biggest faux pas, PR nightmare any company could imagine, let alone when it comes to a chat GPT competitor AI equivalent. Like, what? Yeah. So it said that this XYZ telescope was responsible for these exoplanets. I forget what they're called, the planets beyond our solar system. It said that, the XYZ telescope is responsible for the exoplanets, blah, blah, blah. And it's absolutely wrong. And people went insane on Twitter. Oh my gosh, this is wrong. This is wrong. Even NASA weighed in and confirmed this is wrong. It was actually this European telescope. I mean, it seems like a light lift, and I've had debates about this with people, and they're like, oh, it happens. They're just sitting in a room. No, they're not sitting in a room. This material has passed through like numerous agencies, including in-house marketing teams and product managers, let alone the digital team, let alone the social media. But like, there's no way. Like, so we can speculate as to, I don't want to get off this topic here, but I'm saying in this type, but it shows like, we could speculate like how this was even able to happen. But at the end of the day, how could they get wrong the answers? Like, this is all about, this is the, what? Exactly. Welcome to 2023.
So are they kind of like going, I mean, how are they fixing that?
Great question. They've been crickets. Look into that. Yeah, you gotta look into it, because it's a nightmare. Yeah. Like, dude, like the day before, literally, they had a huge global press conference, and the CEO of the Alphabet company said, Bard is our future, is the future of our company. And less than 24 hours later, boom, shakalaka. It didn't even get it right.
Damn.
How does this happen? Like, I have theories, and no matter, I don't want to take away from this. We could do a sidebar on that. I mean, I think it's all part of, it's all meant to be. But please continue. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think it would be good to have maybe a little event, or just to talk about the emergence of AI and all of these things going 100%. On, ChatGPT, all of these things. Yep. I think it would be a really good conversation.
I 100% agree. And Rokomo was actually going to do a book or something. He was going to do a book, and I said, well, if you're interested, I've been thinking, this was like 2 weeks ago, I've been thinking about doing an event at the Crown when it comes to AI to help familiarize people, because there are a lot of people that won't even utilize the AI. Even we've got ChatGPT up in here, they won't even, and I'm not, saying it's a negative thing. It's a comfortability thing, number one. And to allow for people in a group setting to just shout out, well, ask it this. I think it will be a bridge, not to mention giving them the foundational 101 and just having the conversations, what's going on, How did it give a little intro? Where did it begin? I think it's imperative, especially during current times. So
Especially how it can
100% fully agree
influence
and
society.
underscore. Yes, and then get through the. Yep. Go ahead.
I just want to
That
say, I
Herman?
want to do an event, a reading event, a book reading event, if possible. It's really quick. It's a book that can be read in 30 minutes to 40 minutes.
Awesome.
It's Aleister Crowley's Book of Law. I know it has a negative connotation to it, but I would like to still do the reading, and we can probably split it into 3 people doing a reading, because the book is split into 3 chapters, and each chapter is from a different perspective and a different angle, and it's like one. The first one is female, second one is male, and so on. And so let's select 3 people and then just do it.
Awesome. I've just given you the giver role, so you can actually create events now. So we can sidebar on a time that, throw some dates and times out there, and let's make it happen.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I'll set it up for tomorrow.
Nice.
We can jump back in the text. Yeah, it sounds great. Yep. We've got about a little less than 20 more minutes of this GG3. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So where are we?
I had it highlighted.
The businessman.
From my point of view, where the businessman. Where he is. Okay, now I need to know.
So the public never knows who's writing. It's only the newspaper itself, which belongs to a group of experienced people.
Yeah. Go for it.
All right. So, what the person writing in these papers really knows, or what is going on behind the scenes in the newspaper office, the readers never know. But take everything written in the papers as face value. According to my conviction, which has become as firm as a rock, and anyone thinking more or less impartially will come to the same conclusion. It is chiefly owing to this journalistic literature that any man who tries to develop by the means available in contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate, at the very most, for the first invention of Edison, and in respect of emotionality develops in himself, as Mullah Nasser ad-Din would say, the fineness of feeling of a cow.
Wait a minute.
Leaders of
Let's the finesse. No, the finesse. Wait, the fineness. Wait, is that fineness? What is this word?
That's fineness, like.
Oh my gosh,
fine.
The fineness. Why is that? I don't think I've ever seen that word written out before. It looks crazy. The fineness of a feeling of a cow. The fineness of feeling of a cow. What is that? The fineness of feeling of a cow. The fineness of feeling of a cow. This one I need to process. It's not jumping out at me.
I was just thinking, guys, so we need to go back a bit. So he's speaking about the readers only taking in the papers at its value, and then he says, according to his conviction, okay, the first mention of Edison. Okay, so basically he's saying that according to journalistic literature, it's basically obscured the way that people think to such a degree that they're actually not able to think in a way that is adequately. And then he compares that to the fineness of feeling of a cow.
Meaning, Not being the cow.
So like so is he saying that cows like can't feel, like, I don't know.
Oh boy. Maybe we'll follow up with that in the recap.
Yeah, he will expound on that.
Yeah, and yeah, he usually does. Well done. See, this always happens, and then he ends up breaking the whole thing down.
Yeah.
And we're like trying to figure it.
Okay, so should I continue?
Wait, ChatGPT. We've got Monkey Allen here, Chrome Graves, on it. He asked ChatGPT. Oh my gosh, I love this. This is so good. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say. ChatGPT says the fineness of feeling of a cow refers to the sensitivity and emotional depth of the animal. It is the ability of a cow to feel and respond to its environment and to the emotions and needs of other cows. And there you have it.
So, okay, so basically the cows have some sort of like empathy or like deep feeling of connection.
Yes, it's the fineness of the feeling of a cow. Boom.
Okay.
Bula Nasaradeen, man. Always.
So he's saying that by any means available. But he's saying that like the people are able to develop this kind of emotionality.
It is chiefly owing to this journalistic literature that any man who tries to develop by the means available in contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate, at the very most, for the first invention of Edison, and in respect of emotionality develops in himself. So he's saying what he develops in himself is the finest of feeling of a cow. So he's saying it is chiefly owing to this journalistic literature that any man who tries to develop by the means available in contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate, at the very most, for the first invention of Edison, and in respect of emotionality develops in himself. The finest.
So you're saying it's a positive thing then?
No, he's separating the two. He's saying the emotionality that one develops in themselves is the finest of feeling of a cow. And chiefly owing to this journalistic literature that any man who tries to develop by the means available in contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate, at the very most, meaning the most, for the first invention of Edison. Period.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And in respect of emotionality develops in himself the finest of a feeling of a cow.
I see. Okay. So it's basically base level awareness is what he's talking about. In terms of like the very first, like, I don't know, that's the way that I'm seeing it now. Like,
the finest of the feeling of the cow is the raw intuition. Like it's the truth. There's no limit, right? However,
because you could look at the cow, the feeling of the cow as like a base level as well, because what about the feeling of like a three brain, like a human being which can be more than that? But I get like there's two, like,
it's limitless
many ways to
compared to the journalistic stuff. Yeah. The contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate at the very most, for the first invention of Edison. Whereas, you know what I mean? The emotionality that one can develop in themselves is the fineness of feeling of a cow. Yes, but we'll see. You might get into it. So, the Water Bear says intellect versus emotion. Emotional intelligence is the basis for all intelligence. Emotion is intelligence in ways, yes, for sure. These are the words we ascribe to it. You know. Got a lot of typing going on here. The first invention of Thomas Edison was the electric light bulb. Yes. He filed a patent for the invention in 1879. Here's the thing, though. He also, there's that whole thing with freaking Tesla, though. Okay.
Yeah, that he took. He stole that
exactly.
invention.
Exactly. And so what he's saying here, you know, in Gurdjieff, in true Gurdjieff fashion, at the very most, right? Chiefly owing to this journalistic literature that any man who tries to develop by the means available in contemporary civilization acquires a thinking faculty adequate at the very most for the first invention of Edison.
It wasn't even his invention.
You see, this is what he's saying. This is the difference between listening and hearing, right? This is the difference in speaking and saying. What he's saying here is so profound.
Yeah.
You know, and in respect of emotionality develops in himself the finest of feeling of a cow. We have lost our connection to our personal power. We don't recognize the power that we have individually, collectively. We are solely reliant on what is depicted as the source of power, which is external in contemporary modern times. Still relevant today. It's actually more relevant even today. In this faux, you know, lack of beingness, lack of connectivity, the most interconnected we've ever been with respect to technology, yet couldn't be further apart. Yes.
I continue, or is there more to it, or just comments?
Yes, I think we're good. Go for it.
Okay, alright. So, the leaders of contemporary civilization themselves, standing on a very low level of moral and psychic development, are incapable, like children playing with fire, of knowing the force and significance of the effect of such literature on the mass of the people. According to my impression obtained from the study of ancient history, the leaders of former civilizations would never have allowed such an abnormality to continue for so long. This opinion of mine may be confirmed by authentic information which has come down to us about the serious attitude towards daily literature taken by the rulers of our country not so long ago, in the period when it was considered one of the greatest nations, namely the Great Babylon, when Great Babylon belonged to us and was the sole center of culture recognized by everyone on earth. According to this information, a daily press also existed there, in the form of what are called printed papyri, although of course in an incomparably smaller quantity than now. But at that time, those who participated in such literary organs were only elderly and qualified persons, known to all for their serious merits and honorable lives. And there was even an established rule for appointing such men to these positions under oath, and they were therefore called sworn collaborators, just as now there are sworn juries, sworn experts, and so on. But nowadays, any whippersnapper can be a journalist, so long as he knows how to express himself pettily and, as is said, literary.
Okay, for just 1 second, I want to jump in there. First
literarily.
of all, whippersnapper, like, let's go.
Whippersnapper.
This is so imperative now more than ever, because journalistic integrity has been compromised so vividly and unapologetically that, especially with the subscription-based model that we continue to barrel our way towards, they are more and more targeting their base. And it's become more about, you have people in the New York Times, boardroom. There are more analytical people and social media people and digital, strategic people that are there to target as many people and rile up the base for engagement. Then there are actual reporters trying to report the news. And what happens is that they don't want to upset their base, because then they'll lose the subscription. And what people want to do, they want to double down. Readers want to read what they want to read, meaning they want to be told that they're right. They want to hear what they want to hear. We are more and more getting siloed by our, identities, because we identify ourselves egoically on the external by, party, whatever system, I could go on and on and on. There are these groups and sects beyond religion. Religion is actually definitely one of them, that, it's a doubling down on rhetoric and on narratives. And so here we have these institutions of journalism, media, like supposed to be the news, now always, hinting things to appease the ego of their base, instead of reporting news like with integrity. This is huge right now. Huge. Yep.
Yeah. It also generates a lot of income, and that's points to the greed. So it's all fuels, each other.
False profit. Yep. And here we've got Waterbury. He said, only so far takes you conventional literature. The path beyond is lit up by developing one's own emotional awareness. Yes. Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you want to find us a place to land? Because we're keeping these in 2 hours. Yeah. We've got 10 more minutes, because I started at 1:15. Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, it goes on for a bit.
You'll feel it. You'll feel a good place. You've got 10 minutes. Yep.
Okay. So I became particularly well acquainted with the psyche, and could in general evaluate the being of these products of contemporary civilization, who filled the newspapers and periodicals with their various wiseacrings, when for 3 or 4 months in that same town of Baku, I happened to be present every day at their gatherings to exchange opinions with them. This occurred in the following circumstances. Once, when I had gone to Baku with the intention of staying all winter with my nephew, several young persons came to him and asked his permissions for their new society of literati and journalists to hold meetings in one of the large rooms on the ground floor of his house, in which he had originally intended to establish a restaurant. My nephew at once gave his consent, and from the next day on, these young people assembled, chiefly in the evenings, for their, as they called them, general meetings and learned debates. Outsiders were admitted to these meetings, and I often went to listen to their discussions, as I was quite free in the evenings, and my quarters were very near to the room where they assembled. Soon, several of them began to converse with me, and friendly relations were gradually established between us. Most of them were still quite young, weak, and effeminate, and the faces of some showed clearly that their parents must have been drunkards who had suffered from other passions through willlessness, or that the possessors themselves of these faces had various bad habits concealed from others. Although Baku is only a small town in comparison to most of the large cities of today, and although the contemporary types who were assembled there represented at the most low-flying birds, I have no hesitation in generalizing about all their colleagues everywhere. And I feel I have the right to do this because later, when traveling in Europe, I often happen to come in contact with the representatives of this modern literature, and they all made the same impression on me, resembling one another like peas in a pod. The only difference between them was in their degree of their importance, depending upon which literary organs they contributed to, that is, depending on their reputation and the circulation of the newspaper or periodical in which their wise acrings found a place, or upon the soundness of the commercial firm which owed both the given organ and all of them the literary workmen. Many of them, for some reason or other, are called poets. At the present time, anywhere in Europe, anyone who writes even a short piece of nonsense of the order of green roses, purple mimosas divine, are her poses like hanging memories, and so on, is awarded the appellation of poet by those around him, and some of them even engraved this title on their visiting cards. Among these contemporary journalists...
What does that mean? Green roses, purple mimosas, divine, and her posing like hanging memories. What is this?
So he's giving an example of like any little thing that they write. Like basically a short piece of nonsense.
Puff piece. A puff piece. That's what the term is.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Got it. Water Bear says here, the child does right when forced to do it. The young adult does right only when he wants to. But the old man does right because it is right. This is from The Man with the Iron Fist, the 2012 movie. The Man with the Iron Fist. Isn't that a Bruce Lee film? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
And then he's in parentheses, he says, note, old man here means wise man, not necessarily old, since age is no indication of wisdom. Peas in a pod, hive mind. Yes, I agree. Wisdom is ageless. Yep. And peas in a pod, hive mind. Yes. Yes. It's the Water Bear. Oh, I think see if I don't know what Chromecast is saying here, but he's saying a lot. He said the Iron Fist is a Marvel superhero. Here we go. Yep. Who appeared in the Marvel premiere, number 15, in May 1974. His alter ego is Danny Bride. Yep. So this is the Man with the Iron Fist. Got it. I don't know what I'm thinking of Bruce Lee. Go for it. Yep.
Right. Among these contemporary journalists and writers, esprit de corps is somehow highly developed, and they strongly support and immoderately extol each other on all occasions. Seems to me that this feature of theirs is the chief cause of their spreading sphere of influence and of their false authority over the masses, and also of the unconscious and servile adulation with which the crowd bows before these nullities, as with a clear conscience or conscience, one can call them. As with the meetings in Baku, which I have mentioned, one of them would go on to the platform and begin to read something of the order of the verses I have just quoted, or speak about why the minister of some nation had expressed himself during a banquet concerning some question or other in such a way and not otherwise. And then the lecturer would, in most cases, finish his speech by making an announcement more or less as follows. I now yield the platform to an incomparable luminary of the learning of our time, Mr. So-and-so, who by chance has come to our city on a particularly important business and has been so kind as not to refuse to come to our meeting today. We will now have the privilege of listening to his enchanting voice with our own ears. And when the celebrity would appear on the platform, he would begin his speech with these words. My dear ladies and gentlemen, my dear
My dear.
my dear boy.
My dear. Yeah.
My dear ladies and gentlemen, my colleague has been so modest as to call me a celebrity. It must be said here that he could not have heard what his colleague said, since he had come in from another room in which the door had been closed. And he had opened it himself when he came in, and I knew very well the acoustics in that house and the solidity of the doors. Then he would continue. As a matter of fact, in comparison with him, I am not worthy even to sit in his presence. The celebrity is not I, but he. He is known not only everywhere in our all great Russia, but throughout the whole civilized world. Posterity will pronounce his name with palpitation, and no one will ever forget what he has done for learning and the future welfare of mankind. This God of truth is at present in this insignificant town, not by chance, as it may appear to us, but doubtless for very important reasons, known only to himself. In reality, his place is not among us, but beside the ancient gods of Olympus, and so on and so forth. And only after such a preamble would this new celebrity pronounce several absurdities, as for example, on the theme, why the Sirikitsky made war on the Parnakalpi. After these learned sessions, suppers were always served with 2 bottles of cheap wine, and many hid in their pockets some of the hors d'oeuvres, either a piece of sausage or a herring with a piece of bread. As if by chance anyone else noticed this, they would usually say, "This is for my dog. The rascal already has the habit. Always expect something when I return home late." On the day after these suppers, an account of the meetings always appeared in all the local papers, written in an incredibly pompous style, and the speeches were more or less accurately quoted, but of course no mention was made of the modesty of the supper, or of the making off with a piece of sausage for the dog. Such are the people who write in the papers about all sorts of so-called truths and scientific discoveries, and the naive reader who does not see them or know their lives draws his conclusions about events and ideas from the empty words of these writers, who are neither more nor less than inexperienced and illiterate as far as human life is concerned.
I think that's a good place to stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got
That's so weird because
What?
it's currently 17:17 where I'm at.
Yeah, it's 7:07
I'm
where I'm
like,
at. No, it's
so
7:17
like,
where I'm at.
so 17:17. If you like add that all up, it equals to 7. Because 8 plus 8 is 16. 1 plus 6 is 7. So.
And it's
That's interesting.
7:17 for me. Yeah. So let's go.
Nice.
The year of 7. Yeah, it's beautiful. So we've got some breakdowns here from Monkey Island. So green roses, purple mimosas, divine, and her poses like hanging memories. ChatGPT continued in a row. She dances with grace in a time and place where beauty is never out of place. Her movements of soothing balm that calms the heart and soul like a symphony of love and whole. Then prompting esprit de corps, which is Latin, I'm assuming here. Esprit de corps is a feeling of pride, camaraderie, and loyalty shared among members of a group or an organization. It is often seen in military units, sports teams, and other organizations where members have a common purpose and identity. Esprit de corps is important for fostering a sense of unity and purpose within a group and can help to increase morale and productivity. Kind of like the Marine Corps has a similar slogan saying.
Mm.
And then here the prompt is why Sirikitsi made war on the Pranakalpi. The Sirikitsi and the Parnakalpi were two Native American tribes that had a long history of conflict. The two groups had been competing for resources such as land, water, and game for many years. The conflict eventually escalated into war when the Sirikitsi began raiding Parnakalpi villages and stealing their livestock. The Parnakalpi responded by launching a series of retaliatory raids against the Sirikitsi. The cycle of violence eventually led to open warfare between the two groups, with both sides inflicting significant losses on each other. Interesting. There's no winning in war and violence, that's for sure.
Yeah. For real.
Let's see. Do you have anything to say, Water Bear, before we bring this to a close? Critics are supposed. Let me the actual. Let me find it in the notes. There we go. Let me jump to the present. One sec. Critics are supposedly experts. Experts are specialists. I'm guilty too, if many a time criticizing things I don't understand deeply and haven't researched well either. And he cited in the reading, the public never knows who is writing. It knows only the newspaper itself, which belongs to a group of experienced businessmen. So he's going backwards. Yep, noted for sure. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Actually, I'm going to enjoy rereading it before the next week to see what I drew more than anything from the text. And if anybody else has anything to comment, I say we wrap this up in a big bow. Because it's snowing here in Los Angeles.
What?
Yeah, it was snowing at the Hollywood sign. It's weird. We have a blizzard warning.
Damn.
No, it's insane.
Crazy.
Like, this is very strange. Yes.
When last has it snowed there?
I don't even. Well, they said. Well, it's at an elevation of 1,000. But they have confirmed that it was snowing at the Hollywood sign. Like yesterday, it was hailing. The worst has yet to come. There's a storm coming in from the Arctic that is absolutely insane. So anywhere in Los Angeles, you'll be able to look at the mountains and see snow. Number one. So it's just very cold. Like right now, let's see what the temperature is.
Well, yeah, stay safe and keep warm.
Oh, why isn't it showing me what the heck the temperature is? It's weird. Anyway, you know what the temperature is? It's cold.
What is?
It's in the lower 40s. That's what it is. It's in the lower 40s. It's insane. Anyway,
I need to convert that.
Yeah, so I can tell you what the temperature is. Let me just look it up real quick. From the same. It's 46 degrees, I told you. So 46 degrees to Celsius. It is 7. Oh my gosh, 7.7777778.
Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna.
You see, I needed to ask this question.
This is how it is, dude. You already know. The synchronicity is insane. What is going on right now? How is this possible? Like, what is this? What is going on right now? Look, I posted it in Lotus Salon. I'm also gonna post it in Gurdjieff Notes because it's serendipitous. It's a sign. Yeah.
Damn, that is cold. So wait, is that the maximum today?
No, that's what the temperature is right now. No, it was colder than this last night. It was in the 30s. Yeah, it's insane.
So what's the max temperature for today?
Let me see. Okay. The high is 53 and the low is 45. So the question would be,
what is 53?
So 53 is 11.6666666667.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite low. Damn.
Yep. Yeah, it's cold. It's so cold in the D. I had to. So I think without further ado, we're gonna wrap this up in a big bow.
Yeah.
I think the Wolf Bearer has tapped out. And that concludes this third session of Gurdjieff. Until next time, live with your heart.